Martin Scorsese is one of the greatest directors of all time and in contention to being the very best director alive right now. Honestly, as much as the film community collectively acknowledges his brilliance, I still think he's underrated, underappreciated on so many levels, and he won't be truly celebrated until after he passes, especially when you look at some of the disrespect that is often thrown his way in recent years in light of, for example, his comments about Marvel movies and the state of modern cinema. Even if you disagree with him, surely you can appreciate the fact that he still cares about cinema and film. But even with his advanced age and the prestige he has gained, he still faces issues, whether it's funding to get new films made, or being heckled after an Academy screening of The Wolf of Wall Street when a screenwriter came up to him saying, "Shame on you," because of the film. To think that this man started making films in the 60s and 70s, his first major hit being Mean Streets in 1973, and now, decades later, at the time of the making of this video, he is still in the game, still making films, is unbelievable. At the time I made this video, he's 82 years old, and he just finished a mammoth film production in Killers of the Flower Moon. We should be thankful we aren't drooling into a cup at that age, let alone actively planning multiple projects for the immediate future. There's nobody from the Hollywood new wave of his generation that has matched his endurance. Brian De Palma, Dario Argento, Francis Ford Coppola, you name it. Either they died a long time ago, or their careers fizzled out, with them either not making good movies anymore, or they straight up stopped making films. Only Steven Spielberg maybe really comes close, but his recent works haven't exactly been the innovative works his earlier films were. Scorsese, on the other hand, is still growing, still evolving, his films moving with him as a person, like with his picture The Irishman, dealing with themes of death and legacy, something that's very much on his mind. Scorsese has given us classic films for 50 years now, often raw and disturbing films that deal with dark characters. The fact that the resume of a single man includes Goodfellas, Raging Bull, Casino, Taxi Driver, The King of Comedy, The Departed, Shutter Island, After Hours, Cape Fear, The Aviator, and more is stunning. And it isn't just the sheer amount of acclaimed films he's made, it's that he has changed his style, he has tried new things, he has always challenged himself. Making a children's movie in 3D, for example, with Hugo, tackling a sweeping, elegant romance with The Age of Innocence, tackling religious introspection and faith with Silence. This diversity in his abilities is why it irks me when people often say he just makes gangster films. And that's not even talking about his short films, his documentaries, his film restoration work, his TV series, his teaching to young filmmakers, Spike Lee and Oliver Stone being students of his at university, for example. The man is a living legend. That being said, there is one aspect of Scorsese's films for the past 20 years or so which has remained almost completely consistent, and that is the casting of Leonardo DiCaprio. Scorsese had a fantastic working relationship with Robert De Niro, making 8 films together, ending with Casino, and De Niro introduced him to a young actor who he worked with on This Boy's Life. Scorsese would then hire DiCaprio for Gangs of New York, and rather ironically, never worked with De Niro again for about 20 years. Scorsese made 4 films in a row with DiCaprio: Gangs of New York, The Aviator, The Departed, and Shutter Island. And then after Hugo, worked with him again for The Wolf of Wall Street. Then, rather poetically, Scorsese put DiCaprio to a side for The Irishman, where he got much of his old gang back together again, the likes of De Niro and Joe Pesci. And then for his most recent film, finally paired up his 2 famous muses, DiCaprio and De Niro, for Killers of the Flower Moon. I have to say, and I know this is going to turn a lot of people off, but with each announcement of Scorsese's films, including the casting announcement of DiCaprio, it's made me groan. I hate it. I just can't stand the fact that he keeps casting DiCaprio in everything he does. To be fair, this video might be redundant. I know there are murmurings the duo are teaming up again for Devil in the White City, but apparently Scorsese also said he doesn't want to work on big productions anymore with hundreds of extras, and apparently his next project is Home, a small-scale project. I like the idea of Scorsese doing something small and intimate again, moving away from these massive budgets, but the point I'm making is he's approaching mid-80s, won't have many films left in him, so saying he should stop working with DiCaprio at this point is pretty pointless. And of course, when you're at that age, you're going to surround yourself with people on the same page as you who are familiar with your style. You're not going to want to take risks on someone you haven't fully got to grips with yet. So even if he does work with DiCaprio again, it's probably going to be one more film at most. Even still, looking back on Scorsese's career, I can't help but feel his films didn't achieve their fullest potential they could have done due to the casting of DiCaprio. I know this will sound crazy to some, but I've just never rated the guy as highly as many do. He has given many fantastic performances, some when he was a child actor, and others in his adulthood like in Blood Diamond. But it's like, what hold does he have on Scorsese? Come on, Marty, use another actor for once, change it up. Scorsese gets incredible performances out of actors, and he's someone who has worked with Paul Newman, Al Pacino, Jack Nicholson, Tom Cruise, William Dafoe, Ben Kingsley, Liam Neeson, Nicolas Cage, Daniel Day-Lewis, Harvey Keitel, and so many more. During that 11-year period between Gangs and Wolves, think of all the fantastic current crop of actors Scorsese could have worked with. I don't know, Johnny Depp, Gary Oldman, Joaquin Phoenix, Denzel Washington, Tom Hardy, Christian Bale, Robert Pattinson. There's loads out there. The prospect of one of these guys headlining a Scorsese film is mouthwatering. He was always discovering new talent, picking actors from smaller films and delivering them onto the big scene, like Ray Liotta. And he still does it when it comes to women, like Margot Robbie or Lily Gladstone. But there's never that excitement of, oh, I wonder who's going to play the main role in the next Scorsese movie, because it's always DiCaprio. I mean, I get he clearly has a good relationship with the guy, and he has spoken about how easy it is to get funding for his projects when a huge bankable A-lister like DiCaprio signs on to his films, which must be a big reason why he works with him. It's practically a green light for his movies. Perhaps it's a case of Scorsese knowing he needs a bankable star to fund his films, and from what is available, DiCaprio is the best actor. But it's boring, it's dull, and DiCaprio is limited in his performances. To be fair, he has improved in recent years. He just seemed to be a guy both on screen and off who just took himself too seriously. I feel like he was desperately chasing an Oscar, and I wonder if that stilted his performances. In the run-up to his win for The Revenant, which I think was more of a make-up Oscar for his career, and which rewarded the effort he made in the film rather than the actual performance. But before this, he did seem to be loosening up with elastic, vibrant displays in the likes of Django Unchained and The Wolf of Wall Street, a far cry from some of his works such as The Departed or Gangs of New York. Two performances where he was outshined by far better actors, Jack Nicholson and Daniel Day-Lewis, and two performances which scream, "Look at me, I'm acting!" People roast Cameron Diaz for Gangs, but I think Leo was equally bad. Funnily enough, some of Leo's very best performances were way back before Scorsese picked him up, in films like What's Eating Gilbert Grape or The Basketball Diaries. But you know what one of my biggest problems with him is for most of his career? It's that feeling that when he's in a film, he's acting. He's always giving a performance, which is fine. You get that from many actors, but not from the caliber you'd expect in a Scorsese film. Yes, he's showy, but it often overspills into being overdramatic. I can see him expressing the emotions of his character, but I can't feel it. He never disappears into his roles. He never truly transforms to the extent that I feel like I'm watching the actual character, not the actor playing the character. To me, this separates him as a good actor from the great. I mean, I struggle to even remember the names of his characters in The Departed, Shutter Island, Inception, Titanic and whatnot. It's not Billy Costigan. It's not Teddy Daniels. It's Leonardo DiCaprio in this movie. It's Leonardo DiCaprio in that movie, if that makes sense. It's like he's playing different versions of himself. A bit like Brad Pitt, another actor who I think could be giving far better performances if he tried. And his earlier works, like 12 Monkeys, stands out against his blander later stuff, where again it just kind of feels like he's playing different versions of Brad Pitt. Where is DiCaprio's Daniel Plainview, Colonel Kurtz, or Travis Bickle? Which one of his roles transcends a good movie role and turns it into an essential cinema character? And you can't say he hasn't had opportunities. I mean, he's been cast in so many Scorsese films. So many of his roles have a similar sounding voice, similar mannerisms, similar hamming it up when the script calls for intensity. I honestly thought Frank Costello was one of the dumbest mobsters I've seen in The Departed, for not being able to work out Leo was the rat when he spent the whole movie shaking and squirming. I've mentioned Jack Nicholson, and some would come back and say that's a bad example because he's known for crazy roles like The Departed, Batman, and The Shining. He's famous for hamming it up, but in actual fact, Nicholson is the perfect example because he has also done thoughtful, low-key roles like Five Easy Pieces, The Last Detail, and Chinatown, where he pulls back, where he's restrained. He offers something much more different to the bombastic stuff he's known for. There's something about DiCaprio, a man who's got a reputation for being picky but really pretty much only ever works with big-name A-list directors, that comes off as too try-hard. I mean, and I know this will be light-hearted banter, but Scorsese said something about filming Killers of the Flower Moon, where he and De Niro grew tired of DiCaprio's constant ad-libbing while filming. He's quoted as saying, "Every now and then, Bob and I would look at each other and roll our eyes a little bit, and we'd tell him, 'You don't need that dialogue.'" I can kind of picture De Niro and Scorsese, two people known for improvisation, being comfortable on set with themselves and filming, and then there's DiCaprio trying to prove his worth by flinging shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. DiCaprio also gave an interview once where he talked about being comfortable in period movies because it's easier to act when you're in costume, when you're putting on an accent, when you're transformed into a different time period. But this just really adds to the idea that his acting is a performance, it's theatre. And it doesn't help that when it comes to his Scorsese films, he doesn't mix it up and play different roles. It's always the protagonist, always the main character in every single one of his Scorsese films. Even when they changed the script for Killers of the Flower Moon to focus on the bad guys, his character was still the protagonist, not the investigating cop played by Jesse Plemons as originally envisioned. It doesn't help that he's always had this kind of boyish baby face and a voice that turns into a high-pitched screech whenever he's angry on screen. There are two major differences between the two Scorsese muses, in my opinion: the transformative performances and playing different roles. Sure, DiCaprio and De Niro have similar sounding names, but for me, the similarities end there. De Niro is light years ahead of DiCaprio as an actor. Even in Killers of the Flower Moon, he gave a fantastic performance at the age of 80 plus. But when De Niro is cast in a Scorsese film, you know you're going to be getting something special. And not just special, but new, as the duo even wanted to make sure everything they did together wasn't a repeat of what came before. I mean, compare Johnny Boy to Travis Bickle. Compare Bickle to Jake LaMotta. Compare him to Jimmy in Goodfellas, to Max Cady in Cape Fear, to Rupert Pupkin in The King of Comedy, to Frank Sheeran in The Irishman. These performances are wildly varied, very different. It boggles the mind that these are all even the same actor. Has there ever been a DiCaprio performance in a Scorsese film as contrasting as Travis Bickle or Rupert Pupkin? To me, De Niro is very much an actor, but DiCaprio is a film star, and it shows in the performance, regardless of however DiCaprio wants to pass himself off as a thespian. Then there's the kind of role De Niro plays in a Scorsese film, as well as the fact that there's often gaps between the films they make. You don't get bored of De Niro in a Scorsese film because he switches it up. He was a supporting character in Mean Streets, a lead in Taxi Driver, a co-lead in New York, New York, the lead in Raging Bull, the lead again in The King of Comedy, a supporting actor in Goodfellas, the villain in Cape Fear, co-lead in Casino, lead in The Irishman, and a supporting character in Killers of the Flower Moon. There's enough variation in there. And Scorsese does this with a lot of actors, not just De Niro. He's worked with Joe Pesci, Harvey Keitel, Frank Vincent, Ben Kingsley, Ray Winston, and Daniel Day-Lewis anywhere from 6 to 2 times. But they've always been mix and match roles, never just the constant lead multiple films in a row. Supporting characters, cameos, villains, things like that. And it's not just because of DiCaprio. But he's definitely a reason why I think the works between him and Scorsese don't match up to the likes of Taxi Driver or Raging Bull. An introspective, complex, multi-layered performance was essential to the success of those two films, and perhaps the potential has been there for characters DiCaprio has played in the likes of The Aviator or Shutter Island, but it's never quite reached the heights of Scorsese and De Niro's heights. Scorsese's DiCaprio films are very good, very successful commercial and critical films that aren't reinventing the wheel. And I have talked about my issue with Scorsese's films in the noughties in another video on my second channel, but his works with De Niro are a master in their prime, paired up with one of Hollywood's greatest actors, two raw talents, an artistic kinship that played off each other into a whole new stratosphere. Scorsese crediting De Niro with vitalizing him when he was hospitalized after a coke overdose. Scorsese and De Niro locking out the producers who were banging on the door while they were filming the famous "You talking to me" scene in Taxi Driver. That kind of stuff can't be replicated with DiCaprio. If not for the fact that Scorsese is just too well known, too successful, too respected to be in that kind of position again, to do that kind of guerrilla filmmaking. Even now, Scorsese's casting choices are inspired and idiosyncratic. The rapper Action Bronson as a coffin salesman in The Irishman, legendary insult comic Don Rickles as the manager in Casino, casting directors like Rob Reiner or Jon Favreau in The Wolf of Wall Street, country singers casted in Killers of the Flower Moon. He's still doing interesting casting choices. There's only one tired, same old guarantee in his movies. That when he makes his next big film, whether it's the Sinatra biopic, Devil in the White City, you know he's going to cast DiCaprio as the lead. And it's not as if we're going to get anything new from him that we haven't seen before. So anyway, that's my rant over. What do you make of Scorsese and DiCaprio? And do you want to see a Leo cast in Scorsese's next film? Let me know in the comment section below. Subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.